it to be on a person. I want it to be on a position. That's what I hope. No matter what decision is made, let's make it about the position, not about the person. If we can do that,
I agree.
Yeah,
I agree, and I think ultimately, I think the decision will be made and should be made about the position.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think that he, you know, my opinion comes down to I'm not sure. You know, I'm not sure of the legal decision about, you know, the state not requiring residency based on Ohio Supreme Court law. I know what I think that means, but yet other people have interpreted that differently.
Right.
So I do think we need a decision that says one way or the other, and what our current city manager is, one way or the other.
So we can move on.
Because the city does need to move on. You know, there are things. I mean, I'm just going to be honest. I couldn't imagine being in our city manager's position every day. He's got a job to do and managing the city and all of its employees to be the best that we can be as a city on an efficiency level, the way we run, the way we operate.
Mm-hmm.
But every day he's worried about people kind of calling for his job. I mean, that's got to be just an unbelievably difficult position to be in.
Exactly.
So
they owe to him. They owe to the people of the city. They owe to everybody to make a doggone decision and get it done.
The problem is that decision is up to interpretation, and I guess we haven't got a final. Some people think we have a final interpretation of the Supreme Court law, and some people think we don't have a final interpretation of the Supreme Court law. So now moving forward, 100%, 110% moving forward, if somebody, when we hire another city manager, if we put that into his contract and he or she and that person decides that moving to Heber Heights is worth the position of being a city manager and the pay that we're going to pay to be a city manager, they can then choose to accept the offer we make them and move to the city. And if they don't want to move to the city, well, then we have to look at somebody else. I am 110% in moving forward with that type of contract for any future city manager. Yep. I think in the situation we're in now, we've just got this. It's just a tough, controversial case that everybody has an opinion on, but ultimately, I'm not going to vote on that.
You know,
ultimately, my job and what I want to do is unify the council, unify staff, and unify city. That whatever the decision is moving forward, we're all okay with it, so we can move forward.
Right. And the only thing I would add, and I don't want this is my opinion. This is no one else's opinion. This is mine. It should not reflect on Mr. Gore, Jeff, at all. If council always adheres to the charter, these issues will never come up. Never. And that's it.
I don't disagree with that statement, Matt.
So also something I had just watched was the settlement discussion about T-Mobile and the city. T-Mobile had, I guess, sued the city over a placement of a tower. Have you been following that as well?
Yes, I have.
So do you have an opinion on that?
We
had it
briefly kind of brushed on it a little bit ago. Kind of we were talking about what I thought kind of the city was doing well, and I kind of gave them kudos for the votes they took.
Right.
But,
yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, I have been following it, and absolutely I have an opinion, and that is that the tower, in whatever capacity, whoever the people who are entering into the agreement, who are receiving the proceeds and funds for that tower, in this case being the church, then they should be the ones who have the tower on their property to where it doesn't affect someone else's property rights or their use of their property.
Right.
I don't think the decision that the church made to put a tower up that infringed on the rights of their neighbors, I don't think that was a good decision for them to make. I think that could have been better thought out, especially since there's room on their property to put the tower where the fall zone doesn't affect anybody else but the church.
And just to be clear to the listeners, it's the case of EcoSite LLC and T-Mobile. T-Mobile Central LLC versus City of Huber Heights. And then it's got a case number. It's on the website if you guys are interested to look at that. Sorry, go ahead, Jeff. I apologize.
And I understand that there was, that one of the settlements made was to move the tower 20 feet. That was discussed at last night's special council meeting. And, all 20 feet is movement. It really doesn't, take away the full infringement that's happening to the property owners there next to the church. So, as a resident, you need to feel good and you need to feel comfortable and confident that when you have a problem, that you can go to your elected leaders, talk about it, discuss it, and know that they have your best interests in mind.
Mm-hmm.
And I understand that, the church could be in their best interest to have a tower there that they're receiving monthly proceeds from. But ultimately the decision is, in my mind, the problem is the church made a decision that's affecting the property rights of their neighbors. And I think this just comes down to right is right and wrong is wrong. And I'm glad to see that the city voted not to accept that settlement of the 20 feet. And now it will go back to a court case, and the judge will make that decision.
Yeah.
And then if the federal judge makes a decision that it can be built right where it's planned, then the city has done everything they can do. We've exhausted every avenue that we could have to make sure that our residents, our property owners' rights were fought for.
I would agree to that, yeah.
And if the judge comes back and says, you know what, I do understand the plight of these people and these residents, and I don't think that it's right to infringe upon their property rights, so yes, make them move it. Then that is a win for the city, that is a win for our residents, and it lets the people know that our council unified in a decision to help our residents.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't see how we can go wrong there. I don't see how we can go wrong there.
Right. A little bit ago, you brought up the aquatic center and the rows and things like that. Now, I don't know if you know, in 2015, I ran for city council. I came in dead last, but I tried anyway. One of the things that was the big topic was the TIF districts. There was a forum at Weisenborn, and they had asked I think someone asked me direct, what would you have done with the money of the TIF district? Because it was something that at the time I was not for. And my answer was, well, if we're going to play hypotheticals and we can go back in time, well, I would have never voted for the TIF districts. I would probably now, having, if hindsight's 20/20, I would probably now say, yeah, the TIF districts are, I probably would have voted for them. What are your thoughts on the TIF, the Rose, the Aquatic Center, things like that? Go. Do you have a thought on these things, or?
Sure. I think, so number one, TIF is when I first started trying to wrap my head around TIFs, how they were created, where the revenues came from, what they were used for, I spent a lot of nights with headaches trying to understand how all these things worked.
Right.
But ultimately, the TIF districts were created back in the 60s in California for the purpose of development.
And so that's what scared me. That's what scared me was back then when I was doing research, I researched a lot of the California ones that had failed. That's what had scared me, is those California TIFs. Go ahead. Well,
ultimately what happens is the federal government allows us, the city, because it's all about property taxes.
Right.
So the county is who collects property taxes. And then the county redistributes those property taxes to all the entities that get that money. The city gets their portion, then the schools get their portion, and so that money gets divided up. But all the money comes from actual property taxes. So let's talk about carriage trails. I mean, that has been a big issue that people have talked about for years, I guess. So the people that live in carriage trails, when those houses are built, and they get their tax bill,
mm-hmm.
their property tax bill goes to Miami County. So it's a Miami County TIF. Now, normally, since they live in Miami County, Heber Heights is Montgomery County, when Miami County divvies up that money and sends it back and redistributes that money, we never would have got that money to begin with if there wasn't a TIF. So we're actually collecting and keeping property tax money to the tune of about 45%, which equates to, I believe, about $1,200 to $1,400 per rooftop that's built in carriage trails over a 30-year period. The money that we're collecting in a TIF, we never would have received in the first place if we didn't establish that TIF.
Mm-hmm.
Now, where the city benefits as well, even though it's in Miami County, it's considered City of Heber Heights. So all the people that live in carriage trails are paying income tax to the City of Heber Heights. And as we know, income tax is the biggest source of revenue for any city. It's not property tax. Without a TIF, typical property taxes that come back to the city are 5-10%, because the schools get the majority of that money. Now, so Miami County had to agree to that TIF. The school board, the Heber Heights City School Board, had to agree to that TIF.
Mm-hmm.
And this year, in 2017, we've already written a check to the schools for a little over $500,000. And somewhere between now and December, we'll be writing another check out of that Miami County TIF to the Heber Heights City Schools for about another $500,000. So it's just a matter of kind of being patient, letting the TIF districts build and develop, collect all that property tax money, and then we're giving money to the tune of about $1 million back to Heber Heights. Now, for Miami County with the Bethel schools, that's considered a non-school TIF. So the schools there are still getting the same amount of property tax money going into their schools as they would have been without the TIF, if it had just been straight property tax. So where a lot of people are concerned and worry and think that, well, we're providing all these subsidies out of general fund tax dollars from the City of Heber Heights, so that's not the case. The TIF money is coming from Miami County to the city, and then the subsidies we're providing is out of a TIF fund that we never would have had the houses and had the development that occurred in the first place. So all that development is happening. So Miami County is paying us money to build a development that attracts people to live there that now pay income tax to the city, on top of the assessments and the water tap fees. Heber Heights, we own our water company. We provide them water. So it is a good thing, but it's understanding all the moving parts and pieces, to how that works. So TIFs are just a way that communities can invest in their community, provide infrastructure, and then recapture the property taxes that would normally go to the county. We get to keep. We get to retain that. And yes, some of that is school money, but the schools will ultimately catch up and they'll receive the money that they should.
So, if I may play devil's advocate, if property values decrease, how does that affect the TIF for those listening?
Well, it would just be less revenue that would be coming into kind of what we would call a TIF account. But property values, we know those are flexible. And I think if you talk to anybody who's ever saying real estate has always been one of the safest investments, because we know that markets fluctuate. So sometimes, property values may go down, but then they get reassessed. Property values go up. And in fact, I believe, and I tend to